Hi everyone, so this is Nujat, and for today's topic, I'm going to be talking about the need for feminine hygiene in developing countries. So there is a popular hashtag for this topic that's called menstruation matters. So I would highly encourage you to tweet using the hashtag. Anything you learn from this presentation or anything you feel about this topic, feel free to go ahead and use the hashtag on social media. Okay. So for 2 billion women and girls worldwide, menstruation is still a monthly reality. In many low-income countries, women and girls still face serious challenges when it comes to managing their periods. And that is why we need innovation for feminine hygiene in developing countries. Here in North America, most of us have access to sanitary products. Most of us. If we do run out of it, we can ask a friend or boyfriend, husband, father to grab it for us. However, that might be a luxury for many in the developing countries because the women there don't have access to feminine hygiene products. They cannot afford it. For many, they cannot even expect their males in their lives, so father, husband, boyfriend, to pick up feminine hygiene products for them. Simply because of the deeply rooted stigmatization that exists around periods and the lack of respect women face around the world. Accessibility and affordability of feminine hygiene products is a challenge that makes a shocking difference in the lives of many in the developing countries today. So let's talk about some of the facts. In South Asia, there's 1 in 3 girls that knew nothing about menstruation prior to getting it. 48% girls in Iran and 10% girls in India thought menstruation is a disease. In India, over 88% girls and women use unhygienic ways to manage their menstruation cycles, and that includes ashes, sand, leaves, old rags, manure, and more. 83% of girls in Burkina Faso and 77% in Niger have no place to change their menstrual products at school. And here's a quote that I found that was shared by a girl from Uganda. She's a 16-year-old, and this is what she had to say for her early days of menstruation. So she says, "I didn't know what was happening or what to do to manage menstruation. I used cotton wool, pages from a book, leaves from trees. I suffered much embarrassment at school because I leaked and stained my uniform." Girls should not have to go through this and get behind on education because of this normal bodily function that almost all women face. So let's talk about some of the barriers to innovation. First is social taboos. To make matters worse, women and girls often face social taboos about menstruation, which excludes them from certain activities like cooking or going to school. And there's multi-million more I will be talking about in the next slides. Second is lack of health education that is available to young women and men in the developing countries. So because of all these cultural taboos, most parts of the developing world still shy away to talk about periods. Most of them, actually, there's a quote I have to share. So from WaterAid, it's an organization from India, and they say that most people, and men in particular, find menstruation hygiene a difficult subject to talk about. As a result of these issues, WASH interventions often fail to address the needs of women and girls. WASH is an independent, credible voice in the water, sanitation, and hygiene sector in India. So besides that, the schools in developing countries do not provide education on puberty. Parents regularly refuse to talk to their young girls about menstruation. So without access to the information about their normal bodily function, girls become confused about their bodies and they feel embarrassed, to the point some feel that they're dying because they don't even know what's happening with their bodies. And some girls even may not know that what is menstruation for the first time until they get it, and they're too frightened to tell anyone because they're not sure if they did something wrong. And besides that, young girls, when they get menstruation for the first time at school, they don't know what's happening, so there's a possibility they might leak in their uniform. And boys, not knowing what's happening, unknowingly they make fun of the girls, and that makes them uncomfortable and unwilling to go to school. And here's a quote shared by Joanne from Uganda. She's also 16-year-old, and she says, "Boys used to laugh at me, and eventually I simply stayed home whenever my period started." And the third factor I'm talking about is lack of funding. This is probably one of the most important reasons. There's been a limited research that's been going on to create innovative, affordable products for these women. Most NGOs agree that the main obstacle to securing good menstrual hygiene products is a culture of silence around period. Nancy Mueller, a senior program officer at international health NGO PATH, who works on designing solutions for good menstrual hygiene, says people prefer not to think about it or talk about it. It's a challenge to secure funding because menstruation is not seen as a critical or serious life-threatening issue. And because of all these cultural taboos, girls also feel uncomfortable to talk about these things. So it's very hard to talk to them about what are the issues, what do you need, what would help you. So these are the things that at fundamental level that's missing. So what are some impacts that's been caused by these issues? First, girls missing education. The situation can have a negative impact on young girls and women. Many young girls are forced to skip school during their periods as they're embarrassed or do not have access to the facilities they need, while others drop out altogether. And in India, about 1 in 10 girls miss school, equaling up to 20% of their education. Also, an estimated 200 million girls lack an awareness of menstrual hygiene in India. 30% drop out of school every year due in part to insufficient sanitation and period protection. This is also another fact for India. Another quote shared by Trem from Cambodia. She's 14-year-old, and this is what she had to share about missing education. So she says, "When I have my period, I have to go home to change my sanitary pads as we don't have the facilities at school. Luckily, my home is not far from school, but others are not so fortunate. Some children's houses are very far, so they don't bother coming back to school. While girls are dropping out of school at an early age, they are less likely to return to education, leaving them vulnerable to early marriage, violence, and forced sexual relations." Second impact is reproductive tract infection. It is assumed that the risk of infection, including sexually transmitted infection, is higher than normal during menstruation because of the blood that's coming out of your body. So that creates a pathway for bacteria to get back into the uterus. So certain practices are more likely to increase the risk of infection. Using unclean rags, for example, especially when they're inserted, you know where, can introduce or support the growth of unwanted bacteria that could lead to infection. As an example, findings from Bangladesh, where 80% of workers are women, show that 60% of them were using rags from the factory floor for menstruation cloths. These are highly chemically charged and often freshly dyed. Infections are common, leading to 73% of these women missing on average 1 to 6 days from work. So there's a lot of factory work that's based on piecework. So for example, you make, 100 items, so you get paid based on the number of items you make. So when you miss 6 days from work, imagine how much salary that's been getting cut from their daily salary. And that also leaves a huge economic damage to the business supply chain. And third, I'm going to talk about is social exclusion. We have come a long way, but in some parts of the developing world, menstruation is still considered unspeakable. They sometimes go as far as creating these cultural taboos that ultimately do absolutely nothing but put more mental pressure onto these young girls and women. So in Kenya, women from a certain culture, Maasai region, are not allowed to enter goat pens or milk cows for fear they will contaminate the animal. In many Southeast Asian communities, menstruating girls are not allowed to use the same water facilities as everyone for fear of contamination. In remote areas of Nepal, a woman is not allowed to interact with anyone during her menstruation. She is banished to a special clay hut in the wilderness until her period is over. In certain parts of Ghana, a woman is forbidden to live with a man in the house and cook for him until her period is over. So what is currently being done? There's some small government initiatives that get taken place, but it doesn't get enough focus, and it lacks support, and it lacks funding. So it sometimes starts and it stops midway through and doesn't get anywhere. There are also some individuals who are trying to make an impact at their own level. So there's 2 teenager girls who are using game theory to increase awareness of this issue. So they created a game called Tampon Run, where you, instead of shooting your enemies with bullets, you throw tampons at them. And while you do that, after certain levels, it gives you facts about all these issues about menstruation. There's another guy, his name is Aruna Chalam from India, and he's better known as the man in India who created pads for women. And he basically created low-cost disposable pads. And I have a video to share to show his journey and the kind of barriers he went through to make his goal come to reality. So Mark will be playing the video for us.
Then I thought it is not good to depend on a girl. Then I decided, why not try sanitary pad myself? It has always happened on my early marriage days. So to impress my new wife, what I do, I used to offer a small gift. So like that one day I saw she is carrying something behind her. The purpose is to hide me something. Then I asked, what is it? She replied instantly, like slapping on my cheek, this is none of your business. Then I thought she is playing very seriously. I ran away behind her to see what she is hiding. On particular day I saw a nasty rag cloth with few blood stains here and there on the cloth. Then I understand she is adopting an unhygienic method to manage her period days. different milk, cotton, making sanitary towel. Only the problem, every time I'm making a napkin with a different milk and hand over to my wife, waiting for 1 month time is a time taking process. Then I can decide where can I go for uterus. What I did, I made an artificial uterus in a small bladder, a rubber bladder. Then I filled animal blood in it. There is a tube connection to the sanitary pad which I wore, and I tied here with an elastic. While I'm walking and cycling, I made a small press. A dosage of blood will go there. So do you know that blood? It will give a foul smell in 20 minutes around me. And there is a blood stain also in my cloth. So that's why something is happening around me. I never realized.
விட்டுட்டாரு நினச்சி நல்லா இருக்கும்னு வந்தேன். மறுபடியும் அவர் அதே தான் கண்டுபிடிப்பேன்னு சொல்லி மும்முரமாக இருந்தார். கண்டுபிடிச்சும் வந்துட்டாரு. அதனால ஒன்றும் தெரியலைங்க.
So you can see the kind of struggles and barriers he had to face in order to help the women, where the woman in his life actually considered to leave him. Besides the individual level, there's also smaller organizations like NGOs, Girl Effect, Plan, I'm a Girl, and some local organizations that are taking initiatives to create more innovative, low-cost products to help these women, but it's happening at a very small cost, again, because of the cultural taboos and the funding, lack of funding. So in conclusion, I urge you to take a step towards increasing awareness around the menstruation issue at your own level, whatever you are able to do. The world cannot afford the cost of girls dropping out of school. If a girl attends school for a majority of her 7 years, she marries later, has fewer children, she's also more likely to delay having sex, be less likely to be forced into sex, and if she is sexually active, she's more likely to use protection. An educated girl adds to the country's GDP and is essential for lifting her family, and her community out of poverty. So thank you so much for listening. And again, the hashtag is menstruation matters. Use social media to